because I had discovered a very important thing. Electrons with the highest charge to mass ratio of any particle turns out to be the most sensitive detector of stray magnetic fields. And the university that I had chosen was 4 blocks from the Northeast Corridor. Here, by the way, I've now moved to a university that is on the Northeast Corridor. So the good news is the electrification system here is new. The one down there had been built by the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1919 or something like that. And also there were subways running all around the campus. And the good news here is there's no subways running near the campus. Right? And that the infrastructure of this subway was such that when I actually called the local authorities and talked to them about it, the engineer said, oh, no. Our conducting straps on the rails have all rusted away, so the return current goes through the earth. Okay. So what I was seeing was these wandering, very low frequency magnetic fields, because the heterogeneities of the earth with this huge current running through it gave you this terrible, terrible magnetic field. And the laboratory was here, the railroad was there. If you look at the field, it was basically Z. So I had a Z magnetic field, which, by the way, in the electron microscope is the focusing field. So I could see atomic resolution. The problem is, within the exposure of one piece of film, that resolution was coming in and out of focus on a random walk, and hence the microscope was inoperable. So having joined the university as a material scientist, I rapidly became an electrical engineer. And my first paper was titled On High-Resolution Transmission Electron Microscopy in an Unstable Magnetic Environment. And that was also the name of my first patent. So I out of sheer desperation, luckily I was not yet married, and then I was married, but she was still in Japan, so she didn't have to live through this. But out of sheer desperation, got a solution to that problem, which the university then patented. And that's just the introduction of how I got into IP. I'm going to come back to that very painful experience, not to give any more details, but the painful experience of how a university can screw a faculty member, as one of my examples, for later in the talk. What's the worst you can do? The worst you can do is that loss you have right now because you had to pay for that option. You had to put some skin in the game, which for a stock option is cash. So for that call option, the worst you can do, why don't I just go back and show it so everybody can remember it. The worst you can do is you lose this. What's the best you can do?
Unlimited.
Unlimited. Infinite. No, infinite, realistically. It's not the best you can do. Give me infinite amount of money. My twins talk about that all the time. If you had an infinite deposit in the bank, you could take money out and you'd still have infinite. Great philosophy. Anyway, so this, of course, shows you the real value of an option, right? And interestingly, of course, you can say, well, you know, realistically, this company cannot take over the world. I mean, Coca-Cola cannot grow 10% per year forever unless they find a new, market for Coke on that new planet that's been discovered in that extrasolar system, right? They run out of people on Earth, so or run out of the ability for people to drink it without dying. So so obviously you can put kind of a limit on something, but and of course that speaks to another interesting thing about entrepreneurship, which I'll repeat a couple of times in the talk. The less you know about something, the greater the actual value of that something is. And that's kind of a weird thing for people to get their hands on, because in a sense, the more opportunity you have going forward, that's probably a better way to say it, the more opportunity you have going forward, the greater the value of something, which is another way of saying, the earlier you get in on something, the greater the value of something, because it hasn't really defined what it's going to be, and as it gets defined and it gets better known, its value, its top line value starts, being better defined. So that's another way to start thinking about options also. Okay, but anyway, so what I'm going to talk about in terms of getting screwed by the university, and I'll have two stories like that, is something that really speaks to that issue of what the value of an option is and what a very silly decision the university made because the people that were doing it were not thinking in terms of options, but were instead thinking in terms of what's my budget this year. Okay? And that was just a very silly thing to do. And I have thrown that in their face, I don't know, N times, where N is a very large number. Okay, so in any case, the next thing that I want to talk about is, so I had already gotten this understanding of this thing called intellectual property, because everybody knows about patents, but really doesn't know. People know, but they don't know. So early on, I had kind of gotten in there. Then I got back into my science and was very much of a getting tenure type of guy for the next few years. So got tenure, went out, and went finally on my first sabbatical after an odyssey, which was getting the twins born, which was something that was a challenge in life. And once that happened, I went away on my first sabbatical and looked at what options that I had in a different way, and discovered this option for putting together a creative thing around this area of nanotechnology that I've been working in. So I came back from sabbatical and emphasized much more of the concept of nanotechnology, but also started looking at what the university should be doing better in terms of supporting faculty going forward. I had a big mouth, made a lot of noise, so I got put on the faculty advising committee for intellectual property and the Center for Technology Transfer and all that. And then built this institute called the Nanotechnology Institute, which I'm going to show a couple of slides of to kind of give a concept of the complex milieu that the university lives in and has to deal with. By the way, let me say one thing, because it sounds like I'm going to knock the universities and technology transfer. Technology transfer at a university is a very, very difficult job. Very difficult job, and I really feel the pain. On the other hand, there's a whole lot of upside value there because the uncertainty is so great and the knowledge is so little in terms of what things could go, because the university stuff is so early. It tends to be so early, so you have this greater upside potential. People always say, my gosh, why can't universities be like IBM? IBM gets so much return on its intellectual property. Well, actually, if you look at IBM, it is able to focus its business in a fairly narrow area, even though IBM will claim that it's so broad. It's actually fairly narrow, whereas universities are all over the map, all over the map. So, and typically, if you look at the investment that IBM makes, the staffing and everything, there's a much bigger investment. Tech transfer is typically resource constrained at universities. So it is a very tough challenge to do tech transfer and to do it right at universities. And the faculty have to be aware of that as they're dealing with the tech transfer folks, because the good news is real success can come out of it. Okay, so then let me just say a little bit more about myself. So going down the road then, working in my laboratory, we made it an important set of discoveries and got all the kudos that the very small group of nerds that know your stuff and love you and what your work you do give you around the world. And that was all very good. But we also went in and filed for intellectual property as part of that piece going along. And that paid off very well because we got early ownership for a particular class of nanomaterials, ones in which we take small tubes, literally small tubes, 1/70,000th the diameter of a human hair, a carbon nanotube, and we open it up and make it into a package. We fill it. So basically, the discovery was that I could not only accidentally get things inside, but I could, by design, go into the laboratory and say, I'm going to go in, I'm going to open these things, and I'm going to fill them with molecules, and nature, being the wonderful thing nature is, will fill these things to completion over their entire length, and by doing that, I can tune the properties. And I can also get properties tuned with having my molecules that are affecting the properties being inside a little package, which is, this is going to, for those of you who don't know materials, I'm going to sound like an absolute nerd right now, but nothing gets a materials scientist more excited than end members, okay? So what's an end member? An end member is the material that has the least or the most of something. So diamond gets materials scientists excited for all the wrong reasons. They get excited because it's the hardest material and it has the highest thermal conductivity, a twofer. Diamond is a twofer. Highest thermal conductivity, highest hardness of any material.